we're talking today to the winners of the second Derby Book Festival Children's Picture Book Award. The award was introduced to celebrate books that recognise the diversity of children's backgrounds and the importance of this to their enjoyment of reading, a crucial point to young readers in a city as diverse as Derby. Year 2 and Year 8 schools in the city voted for their favourite book, having read and worked with the 4 shortlisted books. And their favourite book was Brian the Brave by Paul Stewart and Jane Porter. Hello.
Hello.
Hello. Hello. Okay. So I think this is a really brilliant book. And I think the idea that Brian is a sheep who gradually is joined by other sheep who find it difficult to get on because of their differences. And then they have to contend with a fierce and frightening wolf. Okay, so why sheep, Paul? Why sheep? Why did you go sheep?
I think there's just something quite intrinsically funny about sheep. I don't know why. I absolutely love them. I live in Sussex and we go walking a lot on the downs at the moment. They're just beginning to have lambs. And I just love the way that they kind of group and then one will wander off and then some will join them. And somehow just watching these sheep, they're reminding me of little children with the little groups they would make that would then splinter off. And I don't know, the idea of being as inclusive as possible with sheep just seemed quite funny. Sometimes they just seem rather like children. So it all came together.
And that's really interesting because children in Derby don't get to see that many sheep.
Well, I grew up in London and there weren't a great many there in Morden either, I must say.
Yes, and these are very, very diverse sheep. And I thought Brian is a really interesting one. And he's such an interesting character as well, isn't he? Because he's brave, he's very self-sufficient, you know. At the beginning he's there all on his own and he's not at all bothered, and he's very friendly. He's the one that makes friendly sort of things. Does he based on anybody you know?
Say that again.
Was Brian based on anybody that you know?
There's probably a little bit of me in there. I do quite like to bring people together, and you know, it's lovely if everyone then gets on. Sometimes some people don't get on with others, and then you have to try that little bit harder. So yes, I would say of all the people I know, it's possibly me that Brian is most like.
That's an interesting.
It's probably, you know, I've written lots of books, probably about 60 or so. This is perhaps my most autobiographical work.
Oh gosh, because you do write for older people as well, don't you?
Yes, I've written right the way through. I've written a lot of books with Chris Riddell, and we did Rabbit and Hedgehog books and the Edge Chronicles. And I'd written a book about a bird that couldn't fly. And basically that was because she was a penguin. And I was then made aware of the...
Look, there it is.
There it is.
Brilliant. Yes, that's really great. Yeah.
I was made aware of Jane's work, and it's sort of love at first sight. I just think what she manages to do with collage and bits of string and things is just inspired. Absolutely lovely. Somehow coming together, both with the penguin book and the sheep book, it's just worked fantastic.
Oh, right. Yes. Now that's interesting, actually. That leads me brilliantly to the next question, because Jane, some of the children are interested in knowing why you use collage and what material did you use when you were doing the collage?
Very good question. Yes, I don't always use collage, but I do for my books with Paul. And one of the things I love about collage is that you don't have to commit yourself straight away. You can tear out the pieces, you can cut out. I've actually got a little bit of the original artwork here.
Oh wow, yes.
You can cut out the legs if you want your sheep to run. You can try out different positions for the legs. You can reposition the ears until you've got the expression just right. So in a way it does kind of make it easier. And one of my favourite parts of the process is just preparing all the materials. So I'll paint lots of sheets of paper, I'll scratch textures into them. For Brian, I think I used some household emulsion paint or some very thick paint, and I swirled it on the paper. Then when it was dry, I rubbed the side of a crayon across it as well. So it was a slightly dirty looking white wall that he's got, and very textured looking.
Yes.
And you can't really do that in any way except
when you do the clouds. Is that how you did the clouds?
The clouds I actually swirled on with I mixed up the paint colour I wanted, and I used a rag. I just dipped the rag in the paint and swirled it on like that, so you could be quite big and bold.
Right. Yeah.
Try a few different things out and see what works best.
Yes. It's interesting that was a sort of feature there's quite a few children noticed and really enjoyed, and this idea that you can make really interesting, and some of the teachers as well have, so you've got them going on collage.
Good, because when I go into schools, I often do workshops which use a mixture of collage and drawing, and the collage, often I give the children random pieces. I give them little pots on the table of all sorts of different scraps, and that really gets their imagination going because they don't have any preconceptions. They can pick out a piece and turn it around and say, oh, well, that could be crocodile's tail or something, and it'll get them started on an idea that might not have emerged otherwise.
Is that
also worked very nicely is that we've done a couple of school visits and library things, and Jane's produced little puppets.
Oh yeah.
And I then
good.
make the whole story come alive. So you've got the kids in twos, then they split up and they're in two groups, then they're etc. etc. It's worked really beautifully with small children.
Yeah. I actually a few days ago we had a video chat with my niece who's 2, and her favourite book is Brian the Brave. Their whole family know all the characters back to front, so while we were talking I was going like this and she was giggling away. It was really nice.
Jane, could you just hold them up a bit so that we can see, because they're just on and they're on sticks, aren't they? So
they're on sticks. These are actually wooden kebab skewers.
Right,
printed out my artwork and mounted it on a foam board, so it's light but rigid.
When I was in the classroom, I did that a lot, and with you can get giant lolly sticks, can't you? And I stuck them on those, and you can actually teach grammar using those. It's much more interesting, but those are brilliant. I bet that would give lots of people lots of ideas, actually. Yeah, I mean, one of the things as well in the illustrations I noticed, because I seem to know you have a connection with Derby.
I do, yes. That's why I was particularly excited when Brian was shortlisted for this award, because my grandparents lived in Derby. My mother grew up there, and my grandparents lived in Littleover, so we used to go visit them. And I always really enjoyed Derby, going shopping in the market and things like that, and then we'd go out in the Peak District sometimes.
Yes.
So very fond memories of Derby.
The illustrations do look like Derbyshire, you know, with dry stone walls.
Yeah.
But also, what I really like as well are the different insects and birds and plants that you've got in. I think my favourite page is this one.
Oh, the flag iris.
The irises.
Yeah.
Yes. Did you do some research on that, or did you?
Well, I've always been really interested in wildlife, and also before I became an illustrator, I was a magazine journalist on magazines about garden design and landscape architecture and horticulture. So I learned a lot about plants, and that's really stayed with me.
Yeah.
And I've actually got this book here. I don't know if you can see.
Oh yes, British Flora.
A plant research book.
Oh, wow.
So I really wanted to make all those little details. I've really, really enjoyed doing all the little details in the book and making them as accurate.
To me was
there's my little lapwing there. I framed that one.
Oh yes.
It actually chimed with what I'd written. I didn't have Derby or the peaks in mind. I've got to say it was the Dales. I'd lived in a little place in Wharfdale called Kettlewell, and then when the pictures came through, for me, with the dry stone walls and the flowers and the birds, it was exactly what had been in my head when I was writing.
You did mention Yorkshire to me, actually, Paul.
Did I? Ah, right.
Yes. And my in-laws lived in North Yorkshire, so that was quite an interest as well. So they're the ones I've dedicated. It says Yorkshire Granny and Grandpa. That's my in-laws in there.
Yes.
So it's a bit of Yorkshire, a bit of Derbyshire, all mixed up together.
Well, yes, it's a
rural
good
Britain.
Very good mixture. How does that work? You know, how does actually bringing, but children are intrigued by this as well as adults, I think. The picture book, they are just so much more complex than people think. And I often wonder, how do you bring the text and the pictures together? Because the way this has been done is very clever as well. That, you know, I love the spirals of the text. Yeah. You know, when they went round the hill.
That is a lovely detail. I have to say that.
How are those decisions made?
That's all decided by the designer, Sophie. So all credit to Sophie for doing the lovely little spirals and the very playful text.
We had to slightly rein her in a little bit because every word was sort of somehow special, and then I was personally finding it quite difficult to read. So I didn't. It had to look lovely, but at the same time, you can't hide the meaning by making the words a little bit too difficult to decode. So it was a real balance.
Yeah, but I think how we've ended up is just right, and as you say, all those playful spirals are just really, really nice.
Yeah, round and round.
And children are intrigued by those, and the way the word light is sort of just the outline of the word, and also they really like that, you know, that sort of dramatic pause until, and you have to turn the page.
Yes, until Wolf.
On World Book Day, I tried this book out with some 10-year-olds. I just thought I'd give it a go, and I read them the whole story until it got to Wolf, and then I said, and what happened next? And because the themes were universal, they came up with some fantastic ideas. One group of kids said, oh, I know what happens. The wolf and Brian become best friends and go back, and then Brian says, okay, that one was really mean. See to him, wolf. So it became like this kind of Mr. Big.
Oh, right, yes. I think that picture books are ageless. So some people are a bit sniffy about picture books.
They are. It always makes me sad if I'm in a bookshop and I see a child who's maybe 6 or 7 picking up a picture book, and I hear the parents saying, you need to be reading a chapter book now.
Yes.
It's such a shame because there's so much in them.
Absolutely. I mean, for example, with this picture book, I mean, I find this very intriguing. The names. I mean, let's be brutally honest, Brian is not the most common name at the moment. Although a friend of mine's just a grandchild called Brian.
Oh, good.
Which
Brian's making a comeback.
Amazing. But all the names, and that was one of the things that one of the children wanted to know. Why the name Brian? And the other names, you know, Frank and Rose, they're a little bit sort of unusual now, shall we say?
Some are. My kids have a friend, very good friend called Rose, and it was twins, Rose and Louis, so that was Rose and Lou. Cassidy, I don't know, that to me feels a little bit American. Hamish, Scottish. I wanted it to be as inclusive as possible.
Oh, I see. Yes, yeah.
You know, Paul, when I was at school, there were 4 Pauls in my class. There are no Pauls anymore. I have a name that seems to have died out.
There's not a lot of Janes either.
My sister was called
Thank
Jennie.
goodness, no Dianes. Yeah.
Funny, isn't it? And I've got a a very good friend, and her daughter is Mabel. And when I was, it's a lovely name, but when I was little, that was an old lady's name.
Yeah.
So they come and go.
Come round again.
Yes, yes. I do think it was very handy having the characters in front.
It's like the index.
It is, because I kept on. They are a sort of intriguing in terms of, you know, they start off like ordinary sheep, but then you get Tracy, you get the yellow and black spotted ones, and then they go a bit bizarre and unusual after that. Did you do that? Was that sort of was that in your mind, Jane, when you were illustrating the sheep, that they gradually became, you know,
well, it was all in Paul's original text, so it's Paul's idea to do that, but I love the idea. And one thing that I did add was the party hats. I thought the pink and blue striped sheep.
Yeah, I like the way the hats
further and everything.
Yeah, the way the hats are left lying around, you know.
Yeah, and then on the last page, if you notice, they've all swapped hats.
Oh, I even
noticed that. Oh yes, they have. They've all. Oh, brilliant!
Oh, that's cool.
The ending is a little bit of dramatic effect there, isn't it? And I think, and you think, oh no, Brian is going to actually say, I'm not going to play with you anymore. But no, he doesn't, and that's just fine. Yeah. I mean, one of course, inevitably, one of the questions from the children is there going to be another Brian book?
Oh, well, Paul.
There very well could be, yes. Brian himself is such a lovely little character that, yes, he needs to have another adventure where he can be wise once more. So I'll have to work out.
Good heavens, that would be a real challenge.
Yes.
I think, yes. But what do you think, Jane? Would you like to do, you know, can you
do another Brian book? Yes.
Can you see another Brian book on the horizon?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. I think I think as well, it's very odd that they all wear collars.
Well, originally, Paul, I think, suggested collars because they were going to have their names on the collars to help distinguish them. But somewhere along the way, we decided that that was just going to be too much, having those words on there as well. So we've got the index page at the front. But I don't know, I think we just decided to keep the collars. Because also some of the sheep are quite similar, like Tracy and Frank, you can really only tell them apart by their collars. So yeah, my little 2-year-old niece knows the difference between those two.
Brilliant. I think that's really lovely to have your sort of input about that, and I really hope we see you in Derby.
Oh,
I hope so too. Love to go back to Derby.
Yes, it would be lovely to see you in Derby, and I know there are a lot of children who would be very, very pleased to see you. It's amazing the impact it has when they meet an author and an illustrator as well, and to actually sort of recognise that that, you know, these different aspects of making it. I think it's interesting that the designer as well, is the designer mentioned in the book? Or
no, she ought to be, actually. Yes,
it's interesting. You know, that role is sort of.
Yes,
you know,
I think occasionally designers do get a mention, but not normally.
Yeah. Well, thank you ever so much. It's been really lovely to meet you. I also get very excited about meeting authors and illustrators. It's such a hard thing to do. I don't know how you do it. Thank you ever so much for.
Well, thank you, and thank you to all the children who voted for us. Can't wait to meet them all.
Likewise. No, it's
thank you.
Really lovely.